Hey guys, it's Sasha. The number of jobs in the UK continues crashing at the fastest rate since the financial crash in 2008. Excluding COVID, this is the fastest rate of job losses in the last 17 years. Data for recent months has been revised to show that job losses have been accelerating since the October budget was announced, which hiked employers' national insurance and significantly increased the minimum wage in the UK again, far ahead of the rate at which the median wage has been growing. Excluding the one-off drop in 2020, 4 of the worst 5 months for job losses since the financial crash have happened in the last 6 months. Last time, I criticized the ONS for saying that tens of thousands of people losing their jobs is not small, as they put in their update. This time around, they deleted the word small. It now says that the drop is a fall of 0.3% from April 2024. This is equivalent to 106,000 fewer employees. But the next paragraph makes things a lot worse. The largest increase was in the health and social work sector, a rise of 87,000 employees. The largest decrease was in the accommodation and food services sector, a fall of 107,000 employees. So in the health and social sector, the number of employees is growing reasonably fast. The UK government is hiring a whole load of people into the NHS, which is masking what's happening with jobs in the private sector, in the real world. If you go and look at all the data without the government numbers, it's a lot worse. In fact, let's look at it. The number of people working in public administration and defense has gone up in the last few months. The number of people working in education has gone up in the last few months. The number of people in health and social work is up. So if the government was not masking the overall jobs data by hiring so many people into the public sector, the job losses would look significantly worse. And the problem with this job data is it's the people in the private sector, their taxes, that are paying for the privilege of the UK government being able to hire people into the public sector in the first place. If those people are losing their jobs very fast, that is not going to bode very well for UK finances. You can see that all the job losses are happening up here in the real private sectors of the economy that are actually affected by the state of the economy. And you don't even need to look at the detailed tables to really see what's happening. Look at this chart that has the title of "The number of payrolled employees shows little change since January 2024. Then look at the shape of the chart and just think, what is it telling you? It's clearly showing that the employment numbers peaked about a year ago and are now consistently moving down. And the people at the Office of National Statistics prefer to gaslight with a graph title that does not point out the obvious trend we can all see. Instead, they like to pretend that there is no change. The graph is just flat, right? Here is a chart which shows the rate of change of that previous chart, the one where there is no change. So this is the percentage change in the number of payrolled employees compared to the same month a year ago. It says growth in the number of payrolled employees remains below pre-coronavirus trends. Well, no shit. And again, the title is massively misleading here because the growth is not just below 2019 trends, the growth is actually negative. It is not even growth. It is not growth because growth is a positive thing. It is a contraction. It is a reduction. This title should be saying that the number of payrolled employees is contracting in the UK and the rate at which it is contracting is getting worse. It is not just below the trend that it was at some point in the past. This is so pathetic. This is what this chart is actually showing. If anyone from the ONS is watching this video, please go and kindly fuck right off with these graph titles that are lying, they are obfuscating, they are completely incorrect about telling you what the graph is showing. This is pathetic. Seriously, go and just fuck off. How about you stop playing politics and say, as statisticians, what you actually see in the data? Do your actual job, so that we can all collectively start calling spades spades instead of just making shit up to make the government feel better about this awful data. Looking at more data, the number of vacancies is continuing to fall sharply. You can see at the end of this chart, the line has started going almost vertically down. This is data from February through to April. So companies that now have to pay a load more tax and a much higher minimum wage to employees are suddenly, for some unknown reason, not posting job ads adverts to hire more people. How strange. Nobody could have seen this one coming. In the last 2 months, the number of job vacancies is down by 40,000. The 2008 peak from just before the financial crash is only another 60,000 vacancies further down. So people are actively losing their jobs, and finding a new job is becoming increasingly difficult. Every month it is becoming much more difficult. The number of vacancies is collapsing. I was talking to the owner of a local pub a few days ago, and he was telling me how the hit from increased taxes and the minimum wage is way worse than he thought it would be, now that he is seeing it materialize in the numbers, now that it has happened. Next week, he has to make his first payment to HMRC for the employer taxes from the April payroll from the last month, and he is really feeling the pain. The cost of employing an 18 to 20-year-old on the minimum wage went up 22% last month. 22% more expensive than the previous month. That's if you include the increase in the minimum wage and the increase in tax, which goes on top of the higher minimum wage. His business rates for the pub also went up in the same month because the COVID exclusion for hospitality industry is now being tapered down. So compared to March, the amount of money that this pub owner has to send to HMRC every month and to the local council has absolutely exploded. There were 5 people in the pub at the time when I was talking to him. I am not sure how many beers those 5 people have to drink extra for him to be able to afford to pay all of this extra money. My suggestion is they're not going to be able to drink that much. And the number of employees in the accommodation and food services sector has fallen again in April after falling almost 1% in just the month of March. The number of people working in hotels, bars and pubs is now 5% lower than it was a year ago. That is a very, very significant drop. And as a result, the number of people unemployed is now continuing to go up. This month, the data that's just come in is increased to 4.5%, the highest level since the pandemic. And the problem here is that we already know that this number is going to continue increasing because job vacancies are crashing and at the same time people are losing their jobs. And those two things are precursors to unemployment going up, which typically has a time delay and happens a little bit later. So the optics are indicating that unemployment is likely to continue getting worse in the UK. Not good at all. Interestingly, if you read all of these reports, the new ones by the Office of National Statistics, you probably don't want to read them. But if you do, they have been printing these big caveats saying that the data in their reports may now not be very reliable because this data is based on surveys that they send out. And in the last few years, they've been getting a lot less responses to these surveys. You know, after the government went and screwed businesses during COVID, after they forced a whole load of businesses to take on debt that they now have to repay and making a lot of small businesses struggle, after a load of companies had to close down. So there is a section like this in every release that the ONS publishes warning that the data they are publishing might be wrong. I am not sure how the ONS can be wrong on this sort of data. You know, when things like payroll data, unemployment data is literally submitted to the HMRC every day electronically, it seems odd that in the age of, actual hard online data, the Office of National Statistics seems to still be primarily relying on using data from some random business surveys that nobody wants to waste their time filling in. I don't know, have you ever filled one in? I've never filled one in. I don't think anyone would waste their freaking time doing it if they can help it. And the one bit of data that is being presented as positive is the growth in wages. Since 2019, the minimum wage in the UK started being increased very sharply by the then Conservative government. It has been going up at a rate of like 10% a year on average for the last 6 years, and then went up another 7% last month with a new Labour government. And you can see on this chart of the average weekly earnings, you can see exactly when that started to happen, right? The UK started having a very aggressive growth in wages. The problem, of course, is that at the same time, in the same time period, the UK economy was not growing. It was flat. So the wages were going up as a result of not things being great with the economy, not because businesses are thriving and everyone's got more money going around, but because The government was legislating, the government was pushing up the minimum wage way, way, way faster than the rate of growth of the economy, way, way, way faster than the rate of inflation, way, way, way faster than the rate at which the average wages were growing, and therefore artificially forcing companies to pay more. And the result of this is what we are seeing happen right now. A huge economic problem. We've got job losses now at a rate that we have not seen in a very long time, and a severe risk of a major economic downturn. You can see that wages are still growing right now in the latest data at 5.5% per year. And I've been talking about this for a very long time, pointing out the obvious problems. But it seems we're finally getting some other people recognizing the problem with wage inflation while the economy is flatlining. The Financial Times just published this opinion piece called "The Minimum Wage is Now Coming for White Collar Work." And the point of the article is that the lower paid white collar jobs are now actually being paid pretty much the minimum wage without even realizing it, because a full working week on the minimum wage at like 40 hours a week is around £25,500 a year. And there are lots of graduate entry-level jobs that pay pretty much that as an annual salary. Many regular, normal, everyday office jobs also pay around that, somewhere between £25,000 and £30,000 a year as well. A lot of these people who work in these jobs will often spend more than just their contracted hours working. Some of them might need to travel occasionally for work. You don't get paid extra if you're on like a regular annual salary. You don't get paid an hourly benefit to doing that. So we're now entering a weird situation where a high proportion of people, without realizing it, are now actually working for the minimum wage, or in some cases at a real rate which is actually below the minimum wage when you take into account all the hours that those people are working. And their level of disposable income, their ability to afford to pay their bills, is worse than it was before the sudden, very fast increase in the minimum wage started. This is because trying to legislate for higher wages is actually counterproductive if you go too far with it, as has happened. It is good in principle, right, to have a minimum wage for a healthy society because it stops serious abuse, it stops people being, taken advantage of, being paid very little money for working. But we now have a situation on the opposite end of the spectrum where the minimum wage has gone up so fast, it is now actually very close to the median wage, which by definition, if you think about it, is pretty stupid. The gap between the minimum wage and the median wage is where 50% of the people in the country are in terms of their income. So we have a situation where 50% of the country are earning very, very similar, almost the same amounts of money. And the only thing that happens when this sort of situation occurs is that company costs shoot up while the output of the company does not increase. We know that the output of the companies are not increasing because GDP growth has been flat. So the only thing that happens is that companies become less profitable. Times get a little bit tougher. There is less investment in UK businesses. There is less reinvestment. There's less motivation to start up new businesses in the UK. There's less motivation for people to go and do a startup. There's less motivation for existing businesses to go and hire people. Businesses with rising costs are more cautious with their capital. They don't want to hire more people. Job vacancies collapse, right? And prices of everything have to keep going up to cover the cost of the higher minimum wage. So you basically get to the opposite of what you were actually trying to do. People's salaries increase, and that's what the new Labour government have been talking about a lot. The previous government were also talking about it, and it sounds good on paper, but the truth is it actually makes things worse. The minimum wage is £25,000, roughly. The median wage is like £35,000 or £37,000, depending on which data it is that you use, how you define it. This compression in wages, the gap being so small, now also means that there is a compression in living standards. And what happens is not that people on the minimum wage get pulled up. It's not the case that people on the minimum wage start being able to afford all the same things that people on the average wage can afford. No, it's the opposite. It's the people on the average wage who start feeling a lot more like people who earn just the minimum wage. That's what actually happens when the bottom end of the pay scale compresses really hard. It actually gets worse for people who don't have much money. You can't legislate higher wages without making the economy grow really fast at the same time and not expect to receive a massive problem on the back end of all of that. We have a crisis already happening right now in the UK. We can see it in the data, right? The data that we were just looking at, but for some reason, nobody is talking about it except, random guys on YouTube. Remember, if you want to get my Investor Playbook course, it's on sale this week only until Sunday night. You can get 10% off. Go and check out the link in the description and the pinned comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.